What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Undrunken Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney, and I want you to join me as I talk with real people and have super gritty conversations about their journeys to becoming undrunken. So let's go. Dump the drink because it's time to get this party started. What's up, y'all? I am super stoked for this episode and the friend I'm talking to. His name is Garrett, and he's the host of The Deeper You Go, the Weirder It Gets. If you haven't checked this podcast out, please do. It's linked in the show notes. Garrett is one of those friends you can go down rabbit holes with, and his podcast is so good. I'm already very excited to take him up on his offer to come back again. I met Garrett deep in the jungle of Peru, which continues to be such a life-changing experience and time of my life for so many reasons. One reason that I've been reflecting on a lot lately is the idea of risk versus reward. And I think this is a concept I've been personally enamored by most of my life. What do I mean? So while I was in Peru, a group of us went on an adventure that took us to different sanctuary and animal rescue places. At one, there was an anaconda, and they were letting people hold it and take pictures. Y'all, this snake was probably 3 times long as I am tall and easily weighed 2/3 of my body weight. So I was like, yeah, cool, but nah, I'm good. I don't need to hold it. And then at the last minute, I mentally bitch slapped myself and I was like, no, took the chance to hold the anaconda because yes, it was risky. She was getting irritated by this time. But the risk versus reward just made sense to me. I mean, the reward of being like, I got to hold a fucking anaconda. Oops, sorry, I'm working on not cussing. Versus the risk of like, I could die by anaconda. It's kind of a badass way to go out. And this concept leads to so many epic moments and memories I just know will last my whole life. I was talking with a friend recently about going on an adventure where we would be exploring a tunnel in the mountains, which means it would be super dark, very cold, kind of wet, really scary, and totally sketchy. Honestly, I am so stoked and still terrified of the idea of being in a place like that or a cave and the earth doing her thing and I end up getting stuck inside of her. But again, if this is the way I end up going out, cool. How did Court die? She was exploring some caves or diving with some sharks in Africa or cliff diving in Mexico. You know, I'll take that ticket out over being on my deathbed at 80, wishing I would have had more adventures. And it is this saying yes when it might sound crazy to other people that led me to Peru and meeting amazing people like Garrett. Y'all are going to really enjoy this episode. So let's get this party started. Garrett, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining Undrunken.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I always like to start with how do we know each other? And we met in Peru at a little place called Niue Rao. And you you walked in wearing a shirt that said, "The deeper you go, the weirder it gets." And I was like, hello, what? What is that?
Well, so that's actually a name of a podcast I have called that. The deeper you go, the weirder it gets. But it actually, that message or that title, whatever you want to call it, came to me from doing an ayahuasca ceremony. I've done several. So when I met you there, I was there as part of a wrapping up my year-long diet or plant sama. And but yeah, just over the course of working with ayahuasca for I think 6 years, I've just kind of realized that the deeper you go into these, let's call them spiritual um, realms, or in dealing with energy and kind of non-scientific stuff, it really does seem like the deeper you look into it, the deeper you look into the origins of where we come from, who we are, all these things, the weirder it gets.
Yeah, and you've got a couple episodes that a few of my friends have listened to, like the Jedi episode and the moon landing, and they're like, this is cool. Yeah, so I'll definitely link to your podcast. I highly recommend it to everybody.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. And, so just to kind of like, for people that don't know, what Garrett's referring to is you did a year-long diet,
Hmm.
where you were dieting the plant medicines, and that will become what was the purpose of the year with that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, well, typically when you diet a plant, and we can get into what all that means later on if you're interested. But long story short, it's creating a relationship with a specific plant, and you can do that for two reasons. You can do that from a healing standpoint to help you work through certain traumas or issues or addictions or whatever you got going on. And so it's kind of like going to the doctor's office, and whatever issues you have, then they will prescribe a plant for you. You can also do it for a what's considered a healing or a learning context, where you can learn specific things about yourself or energetic properties or anything like that. And so um, I was doing, so most people do not do a year-long diet. It is a long time and the restrictions are very hard. Um, but I was doing that because I eventually want to work with the medicine and learn how to conduct ceremonies and help people. And basically, kind of the easiest way to think about it, kind of like I said, is it's kind of like spiritual herbalism is how a good way for the Western mind to wrap your head around it. And so just like you would go to an herbalist in these types of Shipibo style ceremonies, plant energies are being used on you and other energies in the room to help facilitate healing and clearing everything out and stuff like that. And so, yeah, that's why I did it, to get a deeper understanding of this world and the world of plant medicine, because I'm completely fascinated by it.
Yeah, I would say Niue Rao felt like you said it well. It felt like a spiritual ICU. Like you were
Yes.
going in and having surgery done on parts of you that were just, yeah, we could probably spend the entire episode talking about this.
We could for sure.
If somebody wanted to learn more about this, where could they go? Like what book could they read or
Um, let's see. Well, the one of the best books is called The Fellowship of the River, written by Dr. Joe Tafur, who was actually originally one of the founders of Niue Rao. And that book is fascinating because he's also a doctor who's been westernly trained. I don't know if that's the right word, but trained in Western medicine. And so he's got that background, but also, and he kind of documents his story of coming up through the Western medical training system and realizing that there was something missing in that context. And so realizing that, and he's from Colombia, and so he has some kind of ties to some indigenous root type type stuff, and realizing that along the way that there is more to quote unquote healing, like your traumas and your emotions can also affect your physical health. And that's one of the things that the Shipibo style plant medicine, or a lot of indigenous plant medicine ceremonies, kind of work around fixing your traumas and your emotions and all these things that also then relate to your physical health.
yeah.
So that's a great book. Another one is The Cosmic Serpent by Jeremy Narvi. And yeah, those are probably the two best I could think off the top of my
Yeah.
head. There's also
I
a good documentary, sorry. What is it called? Well, now I can't think of it. Um, oh, The Song That Calls You Home. That's a good documentary too. If people want to, that some of that was actually filmed at Niue Rao. Um, so that just kind of gives you another insight into actually what goes on in there, because it's a lot different than you might think.
yeah. It's a lot different than you
Yeah,
might think.
right, right.
um well, and so with that, so that's where we met, and one of the things that we started talking about with the podcast is you actually take this to another level with health, and you're like working on the physical stuff, like with the hormones and tinctures and herbs on another
Hmm.
level.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do have a significant fitness background. I consider myself a fitness professional for close to 15 years, although I'm not necessarily doing that right now, but I used to own a gym. I was a personal trainer for several years. And that's actually kind of what led me into this plant medicine world. Because I've realized over the course of just just doing this, and I've always been fascinated with health and fitness and human potential and becoming stronger and reaching your full potential. For whatever reason, that's always been a fascination of mine, which is why I got into fitness, because that's a big component of that. And so just along that journey, realizing that we're kind of we have kind of three components that we're kind of made out of, I guess. I don't know. Where you've got your physical component, you've got your mental component, and then you got your spiritual component. And realizing that you have to get all three of these strong and in balance in order to reach your full potential. If any one of those is lacking, then you're going to be lacking. And so when I was working in the kind of the physical realm, I realized I was kind of doing the physical and the mental, but I kind of just kind of like almost like Joe Tafur and his medical thing. He realized something was missing. I realized something was missing, and that that there needs to be some sort of spiritual component. And that word could be weird for some people, but you could also just think of it as like an energetic component as well too. And so yeah, but and now that I've kind of gotten into this world, I realize that there are people who are very strong, maybe spiritually and even mentally, but they are neglecting their physical aspect of it. And so, I'm still trying to figure out my place and what I'm going to bring to the table. But I think that's one of the things, is helping bring that balance in of teaching the physical people that, hey, you've still got to have an energetic spiritual component, and then teaching these spiritual people that, hey, if you're neglecting your body, then I don't care how many ayahuasca ceremonies you do, you're not going to find what you're looking for if you're neglecting your body and your health.
Yeah. So you don't drink alcohol?
um well, I would say yes and no. I haven't drank really in 10 years, maybe 12 years. I mean, with that being said, I have, like, I wouldn't consider myself officially sober. I have had a glass of wine, or one of the things we were talking about was I was making these medicinal beers and also making tinctures and using the plant medicine. And sometimes alcohol can be a good medium for actually extracting the nutrients from plants. But yeah, as far as just drinking to drink, and I probably have, over the course of those 12 years, maybe 2 3 drinks out of the entire year. Three, some, it's not a lot. But um we were talking about these medicinal beers, and this was kind of something that a a learning diet that I had before I'd met you. This was a 3 month diet, and it kind of taught me about these, and it kind of nudged me to go down this whole rabbit hole of medicinal beers. And I don't know if you want to get into this, because there's a whole lot there. Yeah, so one of the things that it was teaching me, let me try to figure out where I want to start. Well, first, it was teaching me about masculine and feminine energies. This has kind of been something that's been on my mind. These are very important because they're creation energies. You could also think of it as like the yin and the yang. They're polar opposite energies that create life. So, and we all have a spectrum of masculine and feminine energies within us. And then obviously I have my spectrum, you have your spectrum, and then And then if you have a relationship, then learning how to deal with those energies is a huge thing. Um, so I've been trying to find my own balance within myself, and then also realizing that our society is completely out of balance and out of whack in our masculine and feminine energies. And so much so that saying the word masculine and feminine energies can trigger people, which which shows you how sick our society is and how just out of harmony we are with nature, that you can say those words and people can get offended. Um, so anyway, it was this Morosa diet was teaching me about that, and teaching me about certain plants that can help boost testosterone naturally, because one of the things that's going on in our society right now is testosterone is in a decline, a significant decline, where it's epidemically bad, and the decline is in both men and women. Here's a fun fact that I just learned, that women actually have more testosterone than they do estrogen in their body. They just don't have obviously as much testosterone as men do. So this decline is affecting everybody. And one of the symptoms of low testosterone is lack of focus, lack of drive, obesity, lack of muscle mass, lack of sex drive, and just general being depressed is if you have a lot of testosterone, your mood is a lot better. So, and there's a lot of reasons for this. Our environmental toxins, plastics, pesticides, sedentary lifestyle, bad food choices. There's the whole prescription medications. And so anyway, I came across beer, and now I thought this was interesting. And this is how you know it came from the plants, because at this point I hadn't drank it all, and beer was definitely not one of my favorite ones. But I had learned by doing research that hops is one of the most estrogenic foods on the planet, which absolutely blew my mind. And I kind of have a conspiratorial mind, and so I was thinking, well, I don't think that's a coincidence that what is promoted as a manly drink to men? It's beer, right? Exactly. And so this is the drink that you're supposed to drink as a man, and it has the most estrogen of any food on the planet. And so I thought that was really interesting. And you know, excess of estrogen tends to make you depressed, sluggish, producing a lot of body fat, particularly in the belly area and the chest area.
You mean a
And
beer belly?
exactly. We have a name for it, and everybody knows what happens if you drink too much beer. You get a very stereotypical look of looking like you're a pregnant man, um, and so yeah, I thought that just kind of blew my mind, and so I kind of started looking into that a little bit more, and then I found out that they used to make beer. So the introduction of hops happened in like the 1500s. It was called like the German purity law. And even though this is a German law, for whatever reason, this seemed to kind of just become standard practice. And before that, they used to use other plants. They would not use hops, they would use other plants. And these beers were known to be more mind expanding, more energizing, even psychotropic. And so that was like, well, that's interesting. And that sounds a lot more fun, first of all. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I stopped drinking, but one of them was I did not like the suppressive and depressive qualities of alcohol, particularly beer. If I was going to do a substance of choice for recreation, I would rather do something that was more mind expanding and allowed me connect the dots and have ideas kind of bursting. And that to me is way more fun than just kind of checking out and being a mindless zombie. So hearing that these beers were more mind expanding, more energizing, that these Vikings would would take these beers before going to war. They'd have these massive orgies, and I'm like, this sounds like my kind of party. And so I was like, I wanted to kind of just check it out. And so I kind of started looking. I went to, at the time I was living in Seattle. And so I went to some high end grocery stores and couldn't find anything. Started calling around breweries, couldn't find anything. In fact, one brewery even got really weird on me and said, "Why are you asking us this? All of our beers contain hops." So that's how I knew they were part of the system. Um, but anyway, so the message was you have to make it yourself. And so when I started to look into how you make it, one of the plants that was used instead of hops was yarrow. Now, now this blew my mind because one, I don't know if you know anything about kind of herbalism, yarrow is a very popular plant medicine, and it grows everywhere. Most people think it's a weed. It grows even on the side of highways, but very powerful plant medicine. And I've been in some ceremonies in places where it's not a jungle plant, but people who have been trained in the Shipibo style, who have done ceremonies in places like in the US and stuff like that, they have used yarrow. And so it's a very powerful plant that's kind of made its way into this spiritual herbalism. So I thought that was really cool. Um, so I wanted to check that out. And so then one of the first beers I made was with yarrow and another plant called Devil's Club. And Devil's Club is a very powerful medicinal plant that's basically grows in the Pacific Northwest rainforest, and all the indigenous cultures uh, love it for its medicinal and spiritual qualities. And so anyway, long story short is I started making these beers, and they were more about the plants and not about, because I think with anything, it's kind of like the problem with alcohol is our relationship with it. And I fell into this in my 20s, just drinking to get hammered and drinking to like thinking you need it to have a good time and completely abusing it. And but realizing that these alcohol, like I said earlier, can be a great medium for extracting the plants, the energy and the medicinal qualities. And so being like making these, so I made these, what I call them, I actually call them fermented herbal tonics because I don't like the term beer, but it's more of like because the fermentation produces the alcohol, which helps amplify the actual medicinal quality. So they're more about these drinks that are more about the plants, and they should be drank with intention, saying a little prayer, and not drank to forget your problems or to get trash, but to actually enhance a relationship or your company or whatever.
Yeah. I that was something I learned after I dumped the drink, was that a lot of the tonics that I got from my naturopath actually were alcohol based.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a whole conversation with her about that and how or if that affected my purpose and my intentions with my journey. And I think it's different for everyone. I think it's
Right.
personal. I really do. Some
It is.
people won't even rinse with Listerine, and
Mm-hmm.
other people have no problem drinking a non-alcoholic beer that has a 0.5% of alcohol. I mean, there's a spectrum, right?
Right.
You talked about like the suppressive and the depressive qualities of alcohol and how in your 20s
Mm-hmm.
you got into it. What was it that finally just you were done?
Well, it actually, the big thing, there was a couple things. I've always been athletic and into fitness, like I said. Well, the thing that started it was I got into triathlons when I was right around 25, 26. And so that's very intense. And then there would be, and so to be somewhat competitive in the triathlons, because it's three sports that you got, your swimming, your biking, and your running. So you have to do a lot of different workouts. And then um I found out that I realized that I needed the weekends to also be able to train. And then sometimes um the weekends were also good opportunity, whether it was, even if it wasn't a triathlon race, sometimes there would be a 5K or a 10K going on, or a long bike ride. And so that was one of those things where I was like, I no longer wanted to be hung over. And really, I mean, the answer, it's the hangovers that did it, because it just, I just started, as the older you got, the worse the hangovers got. And then just started to like feel like I was just wasting my weekend, because you maybe do what everybody does. It's Friday night. Let's go party, stay up all night, drink way too much. And then Saturday, your day's kind of wasted. And if you're really hardcore, you kind of recover just enough to get back out to the bar again. And then Sunday's wasted. And then Monday, you're still feeling sluggish. And then when I was 30, that's when I actually, 31 is actually when I had a gym. And then started doing, sometimes I'd have personal training clients early. I was teaching an early morning Saturday class, and sometimes Sunday morning class. And so it was just like, yeah, I can't. And I was doing a lot of classes, like teaching cardio or workout classes. And you had to be very sharp. And the hangovers, especially once I hit 30, it was like, I mean, it would take me 3-4 days to even feel like I was mentally back to where I was at. And I'm just like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of so it was really a lot of performance based things, and just not, I hated the way it made me feel. It was fun while I was doing it, but afterwards, the juice was not worth the squeeze.
Yeah. Well put. Well put.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you go out now, I mean, you said you drink every once in a while. I mean, do you even
Mhm.
go out
I
anymore?
don't, know. I don't really go out. I would have to be a very special occasion. I mean, at this point now, it's, if I am going to drink, it's like, having a glass of wine with, my dad. I see my parents maybe once a year or something like that, and they really like to drink wine, and so I'm gonna have a steak and a glass of wine or something. But yeah, I don't really go out to bars anymore, um, or anything like that. So it's just more of like a special occasion. Or so when I was doing the whole year-long diet, I couldn't drink at all. I mean, which was no big deal, but it was kind of funny because I was still making these beers and I was selling them to some friends, but not able to drink any. But I tried one just the other day, because it was a dream tonic, and it has lavender in it, which is very good
Yeah,
to
you
calm
told me
your,
about this one.
yeah, this one really helps calm your nervous system, helps you sleep well. And then mugwort, which people take mugwort to help you induce lucid dreaming. So I was actually curious about that one and tried it. And I would say it was very subtle, but I definitely felt a little more relaxed, and my dreams definitely opened up a little bit. It was really cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what do you, I mean, do you just, obviously when you were in dieta, you probably just drank water and tea?
Well, that's all you could drink. I mean, and really, you're only supposed to drink water. Down at Niue Rao, they were allowing some people to drink chamomile tea and anise.
Yes.
Depending. I mean, I think that's fine, because obviously they were allowing people to do that. But some hardcore people will say you shouldn't even drink that.
And what do you drink now that you're not in diet?
I mean, tea, water. That's pretty much it.
Have you
Um,
ever had Blue Lotus tea?
no, it's super interesting though. Someone was
Yeah,
talking
it's
about Blue Lotus just the other day.
I had it at a retreat that I went to.
Uh-huh.
And it's really tasty, but
Yeah.
then it's also got, I mean, there's all sorts of medicinal qualities to it that I'm just like trying to learn about. But I was curious if you knew anything about that.
No, I don't, but it's funny that that plant seems to be kind of on my radar recently. So maybe it's a cue for me to look into it a little bit more.
Maybe make a tonic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so have you had a chance to listen to any of the Undrunken episodes?
No, not yet, unfortunately.
So we have
Uh,
a mutual guest.
uh-huh.
Safa was on.
Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
so you have to check his episode out. And then Ben's been on as
Okay.
well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely want to get back into that. So yeah, I just so even during the year-long diet, one of the things are you have to reduce your input, all the
Yeah.
input. So you're not even supposed to be listening to podcast or read books or watch TV or anything like that, because the whole idea is you're learning how to connect with a plant. And these plants can speak to you, believe it or not, but it's not, at least for me, it's not how you would think. It's not like our this conversation we're having here.
Right.
They speak to you more in intuition, and they kind of come through your dreams or your ideas, and you can kind of feel this subtle energy. And um you can't, and one of the things in our current society is we're way too overstimulated. Most of the time people are watching TV while looking at Instagram, yeah, and texting their best friend while also playing music in the background and
Right.
driving. It's like, and it's just like, so your intuition it's a very subtle language. It's a very subtle energy. And so the part of the process of that is to help strengthen your intuition and get you very very isolated so that you can then strengthen that intuition. So it's been about a month, maybe a month and 2 weeks that I've been out of my diet. So
Yeah.
that's a whole thing of like kind of transitioning back into the real world.
Oh, I was gone for 3 weeks and it was big.
Yeah.
Like Ben and I call it wall meditations,
Yeah.
where you just can stare at a wall and people are like, "Are you okay?" Oh, I'm great. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I want to share with you, and people listening, this idea with the plants talking. I, I've heard this before. I definitely am, I feel energies and such. And when I went to Niue Round there and I was dieting Ohe, and they're like, yeah, it's going to talk to you. And I was like, and there wasn't any on the property, but we went to Monkey Island
Hmm.
and we were walking through going to the center. And it was just like this weird moment where all of a sudden, like the rest of the jungle just disappeared. And there was this giant, beautiful tree.
Mm.
And it was just like magnetic feeling. I just was like, I walked up to it and was like, wow. And Joe walks up next to me and he goes, oh, man, this is Ohe. And I was like, shut the front door. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it is subtle, but also very like there's no question. Like the
Right.
plant is like, hi.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've had lots of situations like that, and I've heard numerous other stories like that. I mean, it's absolutely amazing how that works.
Yeah. You talked about the yarrow
Uh-huh.
and how that grows like all over the place. And then Devil's Club, which is more Pacific Northwest rainforest.
Hmm.
Um, I I just think this is fascinating. Like, where could you learn more about that? You just Google Devil's Club or
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of Google Devil's Club. I mean, this is actually something I'm just kind of getting into, because when I came to this whole world, I had no knowledge of plants. I mean, in fact, I kind of joke that I only kind of saw maybe three things out there, which would be like trees, bushes, and flowers, right? And like that's all I to me it was just all the same. Like it was just
yeah,
plant stuff. And like I couldn't really even differentiate between anything. It's, oh, that's just a tree or that's just a bush. And so I had really no knowledge of this. And In fact, this is kind of what got me further on the path, because when I first came to ayahuasca, I just came out of one, just curiosity, and two, I heard that people were experiencing benefits from it. And since because I was all about human potential and enhancement, I'm like, well, if this is good, I want to see what this is all about. So I had really no idea what I was getting into. And then as I started to get into it, realizing that, oh, this is more than about taking quote unquote drugs and tripping and hallucinating, that this is actually a whole world. And then it's also about plants and plant spirits. And then starting to realize that, because we've all heard about plant medicines, but we always, I don't know, for me, it was always something like, oh, it has to be some super thing deep in the jungle and some very mythical, magical thing. But then realizing that, that there's a lot of plants and plant medicines, even in your backyard. I mean, another one that comes to mind is dandelion. Dandelion is a very powerful medicinal plant, and yet most people are trying to kill them because they want their green, perfectly green lawn. So most people think of it as a weed. And and then yarrow is kind of like a weed. And so it's like, well, there are plants that like dandelion, like yarrow, like
Nettle.
Nettle's another one that you can just find in your backyard or in a park or any kind of open space. And so, there's a lot of herbalism books that can help people get started, is what I've started to use. I mean, I got one, I don't remember exactly the name, but it was something like medicinal plants of the Pacific Northwest. And I think there's some companies that you can get general ones, or you can get some kind of for your own
Area.
region.
Yeah.
Like if you're living in the desert or something. And so that was kind of what just opened up my whole world, realizing that, man, there's all these plants. And then again, kind of the conspiratorial mind of like, why does everyone hate dandelion? Why does everyone, and because we get pushed pharmaceuticals, but yet you have medicine growing all around us. And where do you think the pharmaceuticals get their ideas for the medicines? They're all from the plants. It's not like they just made these up. But what they did, the problem is with them is, intention matters. So that a lot of the times it's the intention is about making money, and then they're also extracting some of the nutrients, certain nutrients, while maybe leaving other things behind. So they don't understand the holistic nature
Yeah.
of the plant. And then obviously, like the connection to nature and all these other components, which is why, I mean, pharmaceuticals can work, but they also, there are a lot of side effects. And I mean, they don't work as well as people think, that's for sure. I mean, just take a look at our society. It's
A lot
not a
of fine
healthy,
print.
yeah, it's not. And our society, if you just take a 30,000 view snapshot, it's not, I wouldn't consider it healthy by any
No.
stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. Garrett, you're talking about, you know, the hangover, which was what got you to dump the drink, essentially, and choose to be, I love the word undrunken, of course.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
good word.
what do you think the relationship, or let me rephrase this. Let's talk about the relationship with plant medicine. And I don't know many people who partake in plant medicine and also drink alcohol. They seem to not enjoy each other's company.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I've seen that um within myself and a lot of people, that, and I think it's, people who go into the plant medicines for um to better themselves. I mean, a lot of times, yeah, they quit doing it because it's, um, like I said, I mean, alcohol, especially the way it's used and promoted in our society, is very damaging, very damaging. I mean, that's a whole other conspiracy of like, these plant medicines that we're talking about are considered Schedule 1 by our government. And Schedule 1 means like that they are extremely addictive and harmful, and there's no medicinal benefit. And I know, and you know this, and anyone who's done plant medicines, particularly in a very good ceremonial setting with people who know what they're doing, it's one of the most medicinal things you'll ever do in your entire life. And so the
Yeah.
fact that that by our government is considered like that doesn't exist, but yet you're it's promoted and you're encouraged to drink a lot of alcohol. I mean, it's promoted in sporting events and in mainstream media and music, and it's just all over the place. And you tell someone you did 2 weeks in the jungle of ayahuasca, most people will think you're
Mm.
crazy. But you tell them that you get shit faced drunk every weekend, they don't bat an eye. They just think that's normal.
Yeah, someone I read this, I think somewhere, or someone said this, where um when you give up alcohol, it's the only drug you quit that people assume you have a problem.
Yeah, I saw something like that, and that
And I'm
and that
like,
and it's true. It's
yeah,
true. Most people like say are just kind of like plugged into the matrix. Like they cannot wrap their head around you doing anything without drinking.
yeah.
Like, how do you go to a party? How do you go to a sporting event? How do you watch a movie? How do you listen to music without drinking? What are we gonna do if we can't drink?
How do you date?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you do? How do you go out on a date?
Right.
There's lots of other things to do besides go drink.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What I have like five questions bouncing around in my brain here. So let me kind of, knowing what you know now, what would you say to that 20 something going out getting smashed?
Hmm. That's a good question. Um, yeah, that those are always like tough questions because it's like those situations make you who you are.
Yes.
But I mean, I would definitely tell my old self, like, at the very least, you've got to find some control on this. Because I think, I don't know, if I had a quote unquote problem, but I did, maybe I did. I definitely binge drink. Like I wouldn't really drink other than like going out, but I did drink a lot. And, I did have, and this was another thing that kind of forced me to stop drinking, is I did have a few like blackout sessions.
Mm.
And like that's absolutely terrifying to me, to be like you don't remember anything and people are like, oh man, you were so crazy last night or this or that, and you're just like, what? Like, and to me, like hearing those stories, and thankfully I never did anything too bad, but like those kind of stories just absolutely terrified me.
Yeah.
And um and I even probably ruined some opportunities, right? Like maybe there was a nice pretty young woman interested in me, and I would just get completely wasted and ruin any chance of anything happening. And so I would definitely go back and tell myself, like, man, just drink a few, like cut back. Oh my God. Because, this is the other thing. And I don't know if you've done this, but like after you stop drinking, and if you do end up going into a bar, like especially a bar that, or a nightclub where people are getting trashed, and you hear people talking, because like when you're drinking and you're in that environment, you think you're having these amazing conversations, and you think you're,
Super deep connections and
yeah, and you think like you're just regurgitating philosophy and all this kind of stuff, and then you hear these people, and it's just sloppy and it's slow and they're very repetitive, and you're like,
yeah.
oh my God, this was me.
Yeah.
This is how I was.
Well, and I talk with a lot of my guests about this. Like, I don't know anybody who's dumped the drink who is judgmental of people who do drink.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a self-reflection of like,
Yeah.
I used to I used to do this and this
Yeah.
is not cool.
Yeah.
Like, this is not fun.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I never really thought about it like that, but that was kind of the first thing that came to my mind was like, oh my God, this was me.
Hmm.
So many nights that I was thinking I was cool or whatever, and realizing that like I was the person having these unintelligible conversations. I was the person that's kind of like walking around through the bar, bumping into people, can barely stand up straight, like
Yeah.
slurring my words. And you're just like, oh my God. Yeah. And that's exactly what and that kind of terrified me as well, too.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know about you. For me, like, as much as alcohol is a suppressant, it also would heighten things. So if I was emotional,
Hmm.
whatever that emotion is, definitely got amplified. So
Right.
if I was pissed off, oh, I was pissed off.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
look out because this bitch is coming through, right? Just
Right.
like, oh. And hindsight, right? Like, and I see it now. So I actually work in a restaurant bar,
Hmm.
and it's a shift.
Yeah, I was
Someone
gonna say,
comes in, 2 drinks later, they're a different person. They're
right.
talking louder, a little slurrier.
Hmm.
You're like, yep, you told me this story twice already tonight,
Wow.
and it is what it is.
How was
Yeah.
that? How was that situation for you to be kind of
I
working with
actually
it?
I don't mind it at
Yeah.
all. I I drank a
Hmm.
lot. Like, I was one of those people who I could have double digit drinks and keep going, no problem. And I'm very social. So but I don't have a problem being around it at all. And I like the social aspect. I will say nights end a lot earlier. And it's triggered by either it's almost bedtime because bedtime's a lot earlier these days too.
Right. Right.
Or it's that shift in the crowd, that shift in the group.
Hmm.
Even if it's people that I love and these are, friends, and we'll talk about how our social circles change when we dump the drink too.
Right.
But even if it's people that I adore, like when that shift happens, I'm just not interested anymore.
Yeah.
Like, we talked about how, when you're drinking, you feel like you're having these beautiful conversations and these deep connections. As an observant, not in that, it's no, no.
Yeah.
And I just don't feel like that's when we stop having things in common to talk about, and I need to leave because,
Hmm.
yeah. Have that for me was a big one, was definitely not where I was going, but who I was hanging out with.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to come to the happy hours.
Right.
That's not interesting.
Hmm.
But if there's a live band at the restaurant, yeah, I'm going to be there.
Right.
So that's definitely shifted. But what about for you? Did you notice a shift in your friends?
Yeah. Although I feel like I kind of had made the shift already. With it started coming out with triathlons, and then so I
Hmm.
started kind of making friends in that thing who would be like, oh, we're going for a bike ride on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. or something. And so it kind of it kind of worked its way out. But yeah, you definitely I mean, I see it in just things that I'm interested in just like you. Like there's no no interest in happy hour unless they have like some really good food item or something.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, I also realize like just kind of who I am. I kind of do extremes, and just even like doing a year plant diet and all this stuff. Like I'm just so into this like world that's not normal. And yeah, what is normal, right? But every now and then, like, because my family is not really into this plant world like I am, and so maybe I'll hang out with them. I went to a family reunion. It's actually while I was on a diet, which was not a good idea, but because that ended way too many questions were being asked and nobody could understand anything I was talking about. But just realizing, like, when I talk, because most people I talk to now are in this plant medicine world.
Hmm.
And so that just seems like reality to me. And I forget that every now and then when I'm actually in normal society and I start talking, I'm like, oh my God, I sound like a crazy person to most people. Like, and so, yeah, I just kind of find that whatever I get into, and then my social circle just, but yeah, I mean, but I've kind of been in this world now for so long that I've almost forgotten what it's like to just have regular friends and go to happy hour or whatever.
Yeah. What's your favorite? Well, I think you already answered this. The no hangover thing. I mean, for me, that's probably
Yeah.
my favorite thing about being undrunken.
Yeah, that I mean that's it
I feel
because
like I got more time back in my
yeah,
life.
yeah, I mean 100% because I just, and like I said, even when the hangover, the worst of the symptoms would go away, I would still feel sluggish. I mean, like I said, once I hit 30, that's when everything changed because a hard night of partying, just even on a Friday, it would take me sometimes till Wednesday to feel like I was kind of back to normal again. Like even Monday, I would just, everything would seem like it was like my mind was operating just a little slower and physically I felt off. And that's kind of what it was like. Yeah, I just do not like that. And then, yeah, and I started getting into triathlons. And then, like, I just realized too, I was enjoying so much. Like, I enjoyed waking up early on a Saturday and getting a workout in
Mm,
and how I would feel good the rest. And then you just kind of
it
continue on
builds.
that. Yeah, you continue on that path. Exactly. And then it was like, and then you go, like, then you realize, oh, it's been months since I haven't drank and I feel good. Like I just feel good. Like brain is clear, my body feels strong. And then you're just like, yeah, I don't want to go back to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. I read somewhere it takes like 80 hours for alcohol to fully process out of your system, like
I
an
believe
average of 80 hours or something like
I
that.
believe it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's right around what Wednesday would
Hmm.
it would
Hmm.
take, and so yeah, it's that's the thing. And so yeah, it's funny because of what I do now, and it's like I'm completely detached from that world that
Yeah.
I even forget that people still do wake up hungover on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning. Um, but yeah, I mean, there are people out there still doing that.
Yeah. How did you get introduced to plant medicines?
um, but it was just like I said, it was just curiosity. It popped up on my radar screen probably like 15 years ago, hearing about it on a podcast, and then um it took a while for it to actually kind of manifest. The thing was is I was wanting to try it, and it was again just from the human potential benefit standpoint. I'd heard enough stories. Plus, it sounded kind of fun, but that wasn't like what was drawing me to it. It was hearing people like having these life changing experiences and then their
Yeah.
life seeming to significantly improve. And so I was like, I definitely want to try this. Um, but at the time, at that time, ayahuasca, most people didn't even know about it. Um, it's not like now where now almost everyone knows about it, even if they don't want to try it or they've at least heard it. But I was a little afraid to go down to Peru by myself because I didn't really have a whole lot of experience with other psychedelics. And and also some of the stories back then were also wild and crazy. And so I was just like, so you're like, well, going to a foreign country, into
Hmm.
the jungle, like I don't know. And so I really wanted to try it somewhere in the States before, but the goal was to go down to Peru. And I didn't really know where to look because because of the legal aspect. It's not like you can just Google this
Right.
and find a place. There's no Yelp reviews. And I had heard a podcast that was like, well, when you're ready, the medicine will find you, type of a thing.
Mm.
And it sounded very like spiritual woo woo, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try that. So I put my intention out there, and at this time I didn't believe any of this stuff, but I put my intention out there, and I had this was at my gym one night, and there was this like 60-year-old hippie woman that walked into the gym, and she's like wearing a dress and stuff. Like, I don't know why she was there. Not that, the gym's for anybody, but not she's not dressed in like gym attire. She's wearing
Right.
like a hippie sundress. And anyway, she tries a class, and I had this like weird vibe, good vibe, but like there was just something about her that was like, there's something interesting here.
Yeah.
So she tries a class, and then I follow up with her afterwards, and she tells me that she's going to Peru in a couple weeks. And so I just asked her, I'm like, "Are you going down there to do ayahuasca?" And she kind of like laughed and looked at me like, "How did you know?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I just kind of had this feeling." And so kind of told her my story, that I'd really been wanting to try it, but I was kind of afraid to go down to Peru. And so she said, "Well, I know some people who do it locally. I'll put you in touch." She said they're very good. And so I'm like, "Okay, yeah, awesome." And so I give her my number, and then I don't hear from her. And several months goes by. I mean, I think she told me she was going down there for 2 months. Um, but several months go by, and I kind of forgot about it. And um, and then one day I was leaving the gym. It was my night off, and then I realized I forgot my laptop. So I turned around and went back in, and then there she was. And she was like, "Oh, I lost your number. I'm back from Peru now. Give me your number." And so I did, and then she put me in touch. And then um yeah, like a month later, I was heading out for my first ceremony.
The medicine found you.
It did find me, which is wild. And it's kind of funny because I had this like minor freak out driving out to the ceremony location, because I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I just took the advice from some random lady that I've talked to for all of 5 minutes. You know what I mean? And now all of a sudden I'm going to some place that's out in the country, or going to do this thing that I don't know anything about these people really. And I'm just like, I've lost my mind. Like, like, I mean, the lady was nice, but I didn't know her, like, but it worked out. So the medicine
I
found,
love this because
yeah,
it's just like, it is kind of crazy.
yeah,
Like, like, yeah, I'm just gonna go, to somebody, don't know, do some stuff. Yeah, that's
yeah.
amazing. Oh, what, what's one question you wished I'd asked, and how would you answer it?
I don't know. I have to think about that. Nothing's really coming to mind. Um,
If somebody's curious about being undrunken,
mhm,
they're hearing your story, they're like, yeah, I fucking hate hangovers too, right?
yeah.
What's your suggestion to them?
Um, well, my suggestion would be to one, find some sort of healthy hobby first, because like that's a big catalyst in change. Like, in order to change, you kind of need to change your environment. And so you need to have a reason of like, okay, so if you're having hangovers, like, look into that. Like, why do I hate having hangovers? What do I feel like I'm missing? And then, and that's a good place to start. But I feel like all change comes, you've got to change your environment, or you got to change to make change, right? And
Yeah.
this is what a lot of people struggle with in making any change in their life. And it's a big thing for people going down to like a place like Niue Rao in Peru. They go down there for 2 weeks, a month, whatever, and they have all these insights, and they feel good and they feel motivated. And then they go, and they always say that integration is the hardest thing. And then they go back to their life, right back into the environment, right back with the same friends, with the same hobbies and the same job and the same this. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, this is hard. It's easy when you're down in Peru, it's a resort down there. It's a 1-star resort, but it's a resort. Like everything is taken care of for you. And
Yeah.
um, so yeah, if you're hating the hangovers, I mean, it's like, yeah, I agree, but then give yourself something like fitness is a great place to start, or um, so you give yourself a reason to get up early on a Saturday, because then if you have to get up early on a Saturday and you have to do something to perform, then all of a sudden you're going to think twice about drinking on
Friday.
Friday night.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think um, having positive hobbies is, because most people want, I mean, it's like we all know we should be making changes in our life. Like, yeah, people enjoy alcohol, but deep down inside, everyone knows, like, this is probably not good for me. Or I think about it in the fitness world, everybody knows they should be working out to some extent, right? Or you should be eating healthy. Everyone knows this. This is not like there's not a person that's like, oh, really? Like, I had no idea. But it's like, why do people not do it? And a lot of times it's, well, one, people love, they get into these habits, and it just becomes their life, and that becomes very comfortable. And even though they maybe know it's a destructive lifestyle, it's comfortable to them. And so, but hobbies are very powerful, and they're underutilized, and it's hard. The barrier of entry can be hard, because it's like, well, you got to get out of your comfort zone. You got to go to that gym that you've had your eye on for the last 6 months, and you got to sign up, and it's got to be uncomfortable, and you got to be the new person, and you're going to struggle and be awkward. But you've got to do those things to give yourself reasons not to drink, not to be hung over. Otherwise, it's like, well, who cares, right?
Yeah.
I've got nothing else going on. So at least on Friday night, I can hang out with my friend, and that gives so it's like you have to change your purpose.
Yeah. A friend of mine, he's been on the podcast, said it's easier to drink.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's uh comfortable, and it's especially if you've been doing happy hours. Like, if every Friday night we do, like, get together with my friends and we do trivia, we do one of those bar trivia things or whatever, or
Right.
we go to this one band and we watch live music and we drink. That's what we do, and that becomes your life. And like you said, like, it's hard because now you've got to have a whole new set of friends, and then it's like, well, then now I'm lonely on Friday night because all my friends are going to this bar and I don't want to go there. But so yeah, finding a hobby. And I mean, gyms are a great place to start, and not like, I would say, more of like your mom and pop
Yeah.
type gyms that have like classes or something that has a community around it. Don't go to Planet Fitness or 24-hour fitness, or not that those are bad, but those places are just, they're very cold and everyone's doing their own thing. So you're not going to find the community you're looking for.
Yeah.
So yeah, finding community and giving, and it's a good start.
Yeah. No, I love that. Garrett, I always love to do quick fire with my guests on the Wheel of Life. So just a sentence or two on how being undrunken has affected just different spokes or key
Okay.
areas of your life. You game?
Yep.
Awesome. How has being undrunken affected work?
um well, just much more energy, right? Much more motivation and energy, for sure.
How has being undrunken affected money?
Oh, well, alcohol's expensive. Oh my God. So that you do the math there, I am surprised at how expensive alcohol is, especially at a bar.
How has being undrunken affected love life?
Um, well, kind of same thing like I alluded to earlier. I can actually hold a conversation now with a woman, and not just totally get smashed and ruin all my chances.
How has being undrunken affected family?
Um, kind of the same thing, being able to be more oh, that's a weird one because my family, alcohol is still very prominent in my family. So um but I feel like I'm more present and more available and more lucid in family settings.
What's that feel like?
It's weird. It's like what you're talking about, like with the alcohol still in the
Yeah, like
family.
being around your family and you're there and present and they're consuming and
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't bother me in the sense that kind of like with you, and like you're still able to bartend or whatever, or be around it. It's like it doesn't necessarily, I don't necessarily care about that, but it is weird when you kind of, especially if it, that switch like you talked about, if that switch happens, then it gets weird. And then, but also a lot of it is just me seeing that I feel like you people that drink alcohol and people that don't, it's a different wavelength.
yeah,
You're operating on a different frequency, and it's just weird to be like, oh, we're on different frequencies, and so I feel like I don't understand them and they don't understand me. And so while it doesn't necessarily cause a problem, it's just weird that I can just feel that frequency being, that we're on different frequencies and view
just
life.
disconnected.
Yeah, exactly.
How has being undrunken affected spirituality?
Um, well, I mean, I definitely found it when, uh, I think, um, being undrunken is it just opened up the the spiritual world. I do feel like alcohol was very suppressive to me in those kind of spiritual channels, even though ironically alcohol can have a spiritual component. That's why it's called spirits. But I think again the intention and all these things matter. And so your typical alcohol and the intention you put behind it is, if you are even open, if it is opening you up, it's opening you up into these negative realms. And so yeah, reducing or completely getting rid of the alcohol has allowed me to just really explore and open my mind up, as opposed to being suppressed.
How has being undrunken affected friends? I know we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely have different friends, and it affects what I do with friends. But although, like I said, I mean, this one doesn't affect me as much because I feel like I tend to just get into some world, something that kind of becomes the main focus, and then I'm able to build friends off of that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's anytime I'm interacting with family members, or if I do run into old friends or something like that, that's when you're like, oh, I'm seeing that we're just in different worlds and different. So yeah, it definitely affects it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
How has being undrunken affected self?
um well, it's allowed me to really understand who I am. And this is one of the things I've talked about in my podcast, actually just kind of recently, is a lot of who we are, who we think we are, is not who you truly are. You've kind of been programmed based on who your parents were, what country you grew up in, the time of the what year. All these things affect who you are. And um so a lot of your beliefs and ideas about who you are and yourself are not yours. They are just these pre-programmed ideas. And I think that the alcohol, um it suppresses you, and it doesn't lead you to asking questions. You just kind of you just become more accepting of the hand you were dealt. Where and once you remove that, then you just start to open up and you start to question more things. And I think, you know, even as we're talking about this, I'm realizing that's, yeah, one of the things that I keep mentioning is like the suppressive, depressive qualities of alcohol. You know, and going back to the schedule one of a lot of the drugs that are on there, all
Mm.
those drugs are mind expanding drugs. They lead you to ask questions about who you are, about your society, all these things. And it's not for your safety. It's because they don't want you asking questions. They don't want you discovering how powerful you are and how capable you are. And but they want, so they want you to drink these things that are not, that are going to make you just follow orders and stay in line. And so yeah, so
Yeah.
that's it's I mean, I've discovered who I am. I you know, back in those days when I was drinking, I didn't know who I was. My favorite song, what was ever the top 40 song on the radio. My favorite movie was whatever's in the movie theater. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Okay, so now I gotta ask, what's your favorite song right now?
um hmm. I don't know if I have a favorite song right now. Um, but I have been getting into actually some more kind of like spiritual type music, or like these I've been finding like these kind of like cool Viking chants that are kind of put together with like kind of techno music and stuff like that, where it's
Oh, wow.
but basically I like, it's funny, I do listen to music but not as much. I usually find myself like listening to a podcast or a book or something, but um it's not mainstream music anymore, I'll tell you that. Like I used to be a big fan of hip hop, and then it's like listening to that now, being like undrunken and more spiritually open and aware. It's like, oh my god, you can see like the programming and the conditioning and a lot of this mainstream music and what it's teaching you to be a consumer and to be flashy, and you are defined by your car, how nice your shoes are, what clothes you wear, and you know, even the degrading of women and all this kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
it's like, you know, it's always my favorite of some woman who thinks she's a feminist but listens to hip hop. And not that there's anything wrong with hip hop, but you know, all music has these bad aspects in it. But um yeah, anyway, went off on a tangent there.
Well, you know, on the flip side of that, once I met Aya, there was a whole bunch of music. I was like, oh, that's what they're talking about in this song.
Yeah.
It was, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing is, again, it just comes back to just being more awake. And yeah, and sometimes you realize like some songs are even more beautiful than you thought and more powerful than you thought, and then there are other songs that you're like, oh man, this is like a pretty bad message. And so
yeah,
yeah, I think a lot of it just comes to like truly becoming awake and just realizing um what it is that you're actually consuming.
yeah. Well, you were talking about inputs,
Hmm.
right? And that's something that I, you know, junk in, junk out, black box theory, right?
Yeah.
Like I've always been like you, just driven towards potential and betterment. And when I was a personal trainer, that was a big concept, like
Hmm.
how it works. And it's just interesting how even just giving up alcohol, I became more sensitive to those inputs
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and more aware of it. Like there's so much alcohol in movies and TV, and I don't even own a TV and I see it,
Right.
right? Like, you know, it's teenagers are drinking to excess on some of these TV shows that I see, like my niece watching and stuff. And I'm just like, it's interesting. I don't want to input that into my life or her life. There's so much better stuff out there. Yeah.
Well, it's funny too. Like, you know, I always think about, yeah, the subtle programming that you see on TV, and like, um, you know, I don't know the TV either. And you know, the Super Bowl was I think it was last weekend. Um, and you know, I do follow some, you know, I'm always kind of got one foot in on the conspiracy world. And so of course, if you're following any, there's a whole thing of like with Taylor Swift or whatever, and like this whole agenda, you know, there's theories about like why all of a sudden she's um at these games or whatever. But I saw that there was this weird highlight when they cut to her, and it was like she knew that she was, it was cut to her, and she's looking around, and then she grabs a beer and slams it, and then they cut away from her. It was just a weird thing. I'm not saying I don't, you know what I mean, but it was just like why did she slam her drink? This is the, because the one interesting thing about the Super Bowl um is it's like the one event that almost everybody watches. Like now, because of the internet and podcasts and YouTube, like there's very few things that like everybody watches. Like when we were kids, there was only a few TV channels, right? And so
Right.
like everybody was watching the same show. Everybody was watching TGIF or whatever. And so like culturally we had a lot more shared things, and nowadays that doesn't exist. But the Super Bowl is the one thing that everybody watches. And so, like from a conspiracy standpoint, people are always like, what is the programming and the message being put out on that? Because that's the one thing they know that the majority of people are going to be watching. So
The commercials on
yeah,
the Super Bowl
yeah,
are like renowned.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I will say Usher had at least 5 dozen Easter eggs in his performance, though.
Yeah,
For any fans of the 90s.
yeah, I didn't watch it, so I had something else going on, but I did want to watch it because I am curious about.
I'll tell you what's funny. I haven't watched it.
Uh-huh.
I just have heard about it, right?
Yeah,
Not necessarily conspiracy theorists, but people who are like, there's so much more of a deeper meaning behind this performance. And I'm like, tell me more.
yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, there is, and I think that's like, one of the things I'm learning. And I use the term conspiracy theorist as almost like taking the power back of that word, because I know people kind of like think of it as like, oh, you're some loony person, but really it's more of just like looking at the world with fresh eyes and trying to understand that, like, you take something like that halftime show. Well, one, like, that that's going to be the most viewed thing, and so like nothing happens that's not been thought of or triple check. Like nothing random happens in a halftime show. So like from the costumes they're wearing to the way they're dancing to the lighting to the this. So like, sometimes like if you go really hardcore conspiracy, people will be like, oh, look at all the, like, there's satanic messages or something in there. Maybe not, I don't know. But if there is something of like something that looks kind of suspicious or whatever, you're like, well, someone thought about that. Like that just doesn't happen.
Right.
Like someone was like, yeah, and let's get this costume and let's wear this and have you do that, and you're going to say this, and these people are going to be here. So it's all choreographed.
At least one person thought of it, even if they
Yeah,
slid it by everyone else.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. That's,
So just interesting things, so it's always fun to watch those things with at least just more of an open mind of like, huh, yeah, this has been thought of and choreographed and practiced and rehearsed and
yeah. The only other thing I could think of that might be watched as much would be the New Year's Eve, the
yeah,
ball drop
yeah. But even that, there's at least several,
time
like,
zones.
well, time zones, and then also like ABC will do their coverage and CNN will do their coverage. So it's like there's multiple coverages being,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, that is another event.
Yeah. Garrett, I this has been an amazing conversation. Is there anything else that you would want to share?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, I think, if anyone's, I don't know if your audience is, if they've already been undrunken or they're thinking about it, but I definitely would encourage people to think about reducing or removing alcohol from their lives and see how it improves. And then also, if you are going to drink, and this is with anything, any substance, like I think one of the things this whole plant medicine journey has taught me is intention is everything. Like if you're going to take a substance or whatever, have some intention, understand what you're doing, say a little prayer before you ingest it. I mean, talking about my fermented herbal tonics, that's what I tell people. If you drink this, like, say a little prayer into it, thank the plants, try to connect with the plants. Intention can change everything. One of the Sorry, quick side note, so I could probably talk forever, but one of the things you probably noticed when you were down in Niue Rao is a lot of people smoking mapacho, which is tobacco. And so I smoke mapacho. Um, and people that know me from especially my old previous life are like, that's weird. You're a fitness guy. Why are you smoking tobacco? Tobacco is bad for you. Well, yes and no, right? One, there's a completely big difference between this pure organic jungle tobacco and your cigarettes, which have 500 chemicals in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also understanding like what mapacho is from a spiritual standpoint. And it's a very programmable medicine and you can do a lot with it. And so while I don't necessarily smoke recreationally, I may smoke my pipe a couple times a day, but it's always with intention, saying a little prayer and trying to connect with it. And so anyway, just intention is everything when it comes to any substances, can really be life changing.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And where can we find you?
Yeah, so I've got the podcast, The Deeper You Go, The Weirder It Gets. It's on all platforms, Spotify, iTunes, all of them, things I don't even know. I just pay for some hosting thing and they put it on everything. So you can find it. I am on Instagram. I think it's just my name, Garett.Renon, maybe, or maybe it's a space. I should have been more prepared for this. And I do have a Deeper You Go, The Weirder It Gets Instagram page as well, too, that I just kind of started. But if you find my podcast in the show notes, I have links to all that.
Perfect. And I will put those in my show notes for this episode as well. And like, I cannot thank you enough. This has been a really great conversation and it's been great to reconnect with you.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to sharing more with you as we continue to explore being undrunken together with friends. I hope the Undrunken Podcast is helpful and inspiring to all of you out there. So if you liked this episode, please send it to a friend and help share these stories with more people.